60 diplomats have been ordered out of the U.S. by President Donald Trump in the first move in an extraordinary international wave of punitive action against the Kremlin, and 18 other countries, including 14 members of the EU, followed suit in sending embassy officials home in the biggest collective expulsion of Russian intelligence officers in history. Theresa May welcomed the great solidarity from our friends around the world in standing up to President Putin's regime. Together we have sent a message that we will not tolerate Russia's continued attempts to flout international law and undermine our values, the Prime Minister said. Mr. Putin's government hit back by describing the expulsions as a provocative gestures, and hinted about a string of tit-for-tat reprisals. This continues the policy of escalating the confrontation. Russian Foreign Ministry. The Russian Foreign Ministry said, this provocative gesture of notorious solidarity with London, made by countries that prefer to follow in London's footsteps without bothering to look into other circumstances of the incident, merely continues the policy of escalating the confrontation. Monday's expulsions follow a 10-day diplomatic blitz by Boris Johnson. The Foreign Secretary has been in contact with counterparts in allied governments around the world to explain the seriousness of the threat to world order posed by the Salisbury poisoning. He hailed the extraordinary international response by our allies last night. Russia cannot break international rules with impunity, he added. Canada, Ukraine, Albania, Norway, the US and 14 EU nations followed Britain's lead in taking action against suspected Russian spies. Getty. Vladimir Putin has blasted provocation from the UK. Theresa May expelled 23 undeclared intelligence officers last week in retaliation for the attack using a military-grade nerve agent in Salisbury that left former double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia critically ill. Sadly, late last week doctors indicated that their condition is unlikely to change in the near future and they may never recover fully, the Prime Minister told MPs. This shows the utterly barbaric nature of this act, and the dangers that hundreds of innocent citizens in Salisbury could have faced. Mrs. May said investigations had shown that more than 130 people in Salisbury could have been potentially exposed to the Novichok nerve agent. The Prime Minister said, President Putin's regime is carrying out acts of aggression against our shared values and interests within our continent and beyond. She added, as a European democracy, the United Kingdom will stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies in the European Union and NATO to face down these threats together. We will defend our infrastructure, our institutions and our values against attempts to undermine them, and we will act to protect our national security and to keep our people safe. International leaders yesterday spoke out to back the British government's suspicions that the Russian state was behind the attack. The White House said, today's actions make the United States safer by reducing Russia's ability to spy on Americans and to conduct covert operations that threaten America's national security. Getty. Donald Tusk said, additional measures, including further expulsions, could not be excluded. With these steps, the United States and our allies and partners make clear to Russia that its actions have consequences. European Council President Donald Tusk said, additional measures, including further expulsions, could not be excluded. In the coming days and weeks, Danish Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen said, Russia has gone too far. An assassination attempt in a European city with a Russian nerve agent is completely unacceptable. Canada's government announced the expulsion of 4 Russian diplomats and refused entry to 3 more. Canadian Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland said the 4 being expelled were intelligence officers or individuals who have used their diplomatic status to undermine Canada's security or interfere in our democracy. She described the Salisbury attack as a despicable, heinous and reckless act, potentially endangering the lives of hundreds. Getty. Chrystia Freeland described the Salisbury attack as a despicable, heinous and reckless act. The nerve agent attack represents a clear threat to the rules-based international order and to the rules that were established by the international community to ensure chemical weapons would never again destroy human lives, she said. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said, in solidarity with our British partners, we have today notified the Russian authorities of our decision to expel 4 Russian personnel with diplomatic status from French territory within 1 week. Polish Foreign Minister Jacek Zarutowicz told a news conference that the diplomats were to leave the country by April 3, showing solidarity with Britain and other countries is the most important thing, he said. In Moscow, President Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia would respond to the expulsion on the principle of reciprocity. Russia has already ordered 23 British diplomats to leave in response to the expulsion of a similar number of undeclared Russian intelligence officers from the UK. In angry clashes in the Commons, Jeremy Corbyn was accused by a Labour MP of making false claims about his track record on criticising Russia. The Labour leader, who has been under fire for failing to accept Russian state culpability for the attack, used his response to the Prime Minister to finally acknowledge that there was no other conclusion than Russia being directly or indirectly responsible. But Mr. Corbyn was challenged by backbencher John Woodcock after the Labour leader claimed he had been a robust critic of the actions of the Russian government for more than 20 years. Mr. Woodcock intervened to say, "I've sat here reading his article in The Morning Star after Russia annexed part of Ukraine, where the strongest criticism he makes there is on Ukraine. I would not condone Russian behavior or expansion, but it is not unprovoked," and then into the usual criticism of the US and NATO and UK policy. "It's just not true," Tory MPs screamed more after Mr. Woodcock's remarks. Mr. Corbyn replied, "I thank my honourable friend for his usual helpful intervention. Thank you very much."